everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. This is Joe Moore coming at you from Breckenridge, Colorado. Today on the show, we have Philip Wolf, longtime friend and ally in the psychedelic and cannabis space. Philip has been on before, creator, maybe co-creator, we'll say, of Cultivating Spirits, a really cool kind of cannabis and dining pairing experience company operating all over the States now. And a new kind of education service called CashoM around cannabis, and we'll get into that in the show a bit. Philip's pretty deep in the plant medicine space, and we have a lot of really great private conversations that aren't usually recorded. So this kind of builds on a lot of that kind of relationship there. And I think worth noting too, Philip and I are trying our best to like bring authenticity and truth to our quest here. And it's not easy. There's so much hype, there's so much BS, and it's hard to see clearly. So in a way, like what we're doing is an example of what we feel like is authentic. And there's so many other great people out there doing similar stuff and trying really hard to figure out what that means. And I think Philip is an exemplar of that. He tries so hard, does so much work thinking about this stuff, and it's quite bold too. We get into some of his experiences later in the episode, so stay tuned to that. Yeah, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but like this is how I think, like what is true, what isn't, what's more urgent, what's less urgent. And, there's always priorities, and, figuring out our relationship to the material world is always quite an interesting and important one. A lot of us go about it in quite an unexamined way, but this is certainly an examined life, not an unexamined one. Philip, you'll see the level of detail he has here. It's quite impressive. Anyway, grateful for Philip, grateful for his friendship and allyship over the years, and can't wait to see what happens with Philip's world around education and just expansion. So, all right, I hope you all enjoy this episode. I'll see you on the other side. Welcome back, everybody. Joe Moore here. We're recording live in the living room, my living room in Breckenridge, Colorado, with Philip Wolf. How you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing so good, Joe. I'm doing so good. It's nice to be here looking at the slopes from your living room.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I can't believe, like, what is it today, the 12th or something? And there's still so much snow.
Yeah, I know.
It's unbelievable.
We need the snow, but it's miserable outside.
It's really cold. Yeah, right. Like the fire season last year was terrifying. And it's like, I'm looking at another scary summer.
Yeah. Feeling for people in Colorado, California, and the West as a whole, like, and luckily these plant medicines are really sweeping across the world right now, and hopefully I've always believed it wasn't a medicine for us, but it's a medicine for Mother Earth, and humans need to take it. So we can open up to the importance of preservation of Turtle Island, of Mother Earth, of, this land that we walk on every day.
One of the most valuable things we have.
Yeah.
The planet.
Yeah. Which won't die. We'll die. The planet will be here.
So I'm trying to think back. I think I started knowing you in 2014 because you were somehow affiliated. I don't exactly know the relationship with Breckenridge Cannabis Club, but like you were pretty deep in the cannabis scene. And it was right around the time where you were trying to do like the limo rides and like the kind of like cannabis and like dinners and like the early days of this
cannabis
project,
and
right?
wine tours.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And eventually you kind of landed on kind of a sweet offering that was really working out. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So with Joe, speaking of Breckenridge Cannabis Club, there's actually the CNN documentary High Profits, which was going on at the time here in Breckenridge and actually caused quite the little stir in the city. It's actually very dramatic. It's a pretty good documentary, actually. I think you can find it on Netflix these days. But that's how we ended up connecting, through Allie and through, Lauren Hoover, ultimately. God bless her soul. As she shines so bright. Anyone ever hears me use the term love and light, it's in honor of Lauren Hoover. So look her up, and there's a lot of beautiful things. But what Joe is speaking on that I landed on was essentially the theorization of the cannabis pairing process And this came from creating wine style cannabis experiences in Colorado in 2014. And Cultivating Spirits, one of my companies, is actually the first company in the United States to offer legal cannabis dinners to the general public. And general public and legal are the key
so awesome. Yeah.
terms in that, in that statement right there. And, offering wine style cannabis experiences, there's a lot of, it's like, okay, let's do vineyard tours and, tastings. And, I was just making the comparable. And then there's wine, pairings, obviously. And so I was like, oh, we can pair strawberry cough with strawberry shortcake, just super cheesy, honestly. And my background comes from cultivation in 2009. And so I've been working with the plant for a long time, but I never heard about terpenes in 2014. Or I'd say 2013.
It wasn't really part of the conversation, really.
Yeah, no one knew about it. Whenever I started researching them, like Kyle Cushman had one article on it, and then Leafly had 5 paragraphs on it, and that was about it. And although I am grateful for those that one article and those 5 paragraphs because they did help.
Yeah.
But it was really brilliant because I learned it from Jessica Catalano, author of The Ganja Kitchen Revolution, who happened to be up in this community as well. And she taught me about terpenes. And all of a sudden, with this whole idea of cannabis pairings, I was like, wow, this could actually be broken down to a science, but we also give people a tool where they can identify what type of high they're going to have before they even consume. Therefore, you can smoke something that's going to enhance your experience as opposed to take away from it. And we can do this on the platform of fine dining. And now all of this is through smoking and not through ingesting through edibles, right? Infusions. And so that is the sweet spot that Joe is speaking of, because we have the experience of fine dining. We have a legitimacy to what we're actually doing in the process, although it is a creative art for us and not a science experiment, if you will. And we give people a very important tool. And once I realized this, we went all in just on cannabis pairing dinners. And I was like, this is how we can make this. This is a pathway to help ignite change within this particular service. And
because you make it really accessible, right? It's kind of like, I just flew in from Houston. I heard there's legal weed. What do I do?
Yeah, absolutely. We made it accessible for people in the sense of we had that experience and we marketed it to them and they could find us. I wish we could get our price points better so we could truly be accessible to all walks of life, and we're working on educational courses that will be accessible to everyone, regardless of your income status. And we can chat about CashoM more later. But it was, I would serve these CEOs and even political figures. I've done athletes, but we'll just say middle America, right, is who we were serving because we weren't doing much of the cannabis community. And you just saw at the end of the dinner, this little light bulb come on in their head, or this little crack in the skull where the light was shining in, was like, oh, I can use cannabis like this. And that was like, yes, you can. And it excited me so much. I was like, let's go and continue to just drive this, because we have the ability to shake people's cannabis experience. And if people have a relationship with this plant that has the awareness in which I've been able to educate people on, then people have the opportunity. And it's not just me. There's obviously a lot of people who open people up, but this is, one of the people who are standing in a circle that is their goal. And if people become in better relationship with cannabis, to have more awareness, then they'll get in better touch with themselves. And if people are in better touch with themselves, they're going to be in better touch with the world around them. And so this has been the mission. This is what has kept me through the hard times of cannabis legalization that Joe's seen firsthand, living in the same community as me over the last 8 years. And, also watching Joe's journey with psychedelics today. It's been, it's been fun to see this parallel of, I would just say a passion that we both have within our work.
Yeah. I was, you mentioned the author of that cookbook, and I had a memory of actually seeing you on a panel discussion.
Jessica Catalano, yeah.
Yeah, with Dr. B.
Dr. Barry Bialik, who's opening a school in Nepal right now, a whole cannabis university.
Holy shit. I hate to say it publicly, but I will. There's some very interesting psychedelic laws in Nepal.
Oh, wow.
That's all I'll say.
We'll reach out to Dr. B and figure out.
I'm sure he's in the know.
Yeah, he loves the holistic wellness.
That really helped me, that panel discussion you were on. I was like, wait a second. I think that for me was one of the pivotal moments around oh, there's actually some seriously compelling data, despite the empire trying to like keep that data from happening.
Yeah. And that's how beautiful. And this is, you know, how really things are in the psychedelic space now, but especially 2 or 3 years ago, right? Was I put that together for Cultivating Spirits to offer to the community. And we did 2 of them. The first one was actually only for medical providers. So they had the ability to speak to their patients. And so we went and put in flyers at the hospitals and the doctor's offices and stuff for the doctors. And because people were not able to speak to their doctors about medical marijuana use, because this is medical days. This isn't recreational days.
I still barely can.
Yeah, this is, Well, yeah, and they still barely can. 2 providers showed up.
Oh my God. What a conversation.
2 people showed up for the medical providers that were in the medical industry, plus the newspaper. Luckily, the newspaper did an article and they didn't say only 2 people showed up. But then we did one for the community. And then that's when, you know, I think I'd met you before then, but that's when the understanding of us kind of being in the same movements was identified.
Yeah. Like, you know? There was obviously so much depth shown in that experience where I'm like, oh, okay. And then I started seeing the overlap and flow into the psychedelic space a bit. And it's just fascinating, right? There's so much, like, it's hard to explain how many people in this area, in Colorado in general, are like super inclined towards like plant medicine, psychedelics, etc. And, you know, actually having really interesting, cool relationships with cannabis, which is, you know, kind of rare. Yeah. But it does happen here. Yeah. And I'm sure it happens elsewhere too, but it's just like, there's a lot of it here.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that, I think that is because, first of all, I love it because it is a plant medicine and cannabis is a psychedelic, and it, you know, and we can get into this later too, if you want to, but it actually has a really important aspect, I think, of protecting the other master plant medicines, honestly, which is an interesting just theory that I have. But I think one of the reasons you see such, you know, let's just say cohabitation between, you know, cannabis and psychedelics, as they should be cohabitants, but there is a separateness within the movements sometimes. And a lot of people went from the cannabis space into the psychedelic space. And so there's been a lot of the cannabis space has been hard. The psychedelic space is going to be even harder, I think, for quote unquote the little guy. And that was so beautiful about the Colorado upbringing of the cannabis culture, because the little guy got a shot, where California, that was almost obsolete.
Can you lay that out for us? Like, what did Colorado do that was slightly different?
Yeah. So first of all, Colorado had a thriving medical market that was really deregulated. So I opened up a dispensary in 2009 for $15,000.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. I threw in 7,500. Another guy threw in 7,500, and it was the wild, wild west. And so back then we would run around with backpacks and pounds in our backpacks and paperwork, basically, because you were able to be a caregiver and you didn't need any sort of license from the state to be a caregiver.
Incredible.
And so what a caregiver is you can grow and possess for that particular patient. So, you know, there's different numbers, but that you could apply for, but it's mostly 2 ounces, right? And when I say apply, it's what a doctor could give you access to. And so we would have 24 patients, for instance, and you could possess 48 ounces and grow, you know, 24 times 6. So what's that? 142 plants. And so within that, there is
it's no joke. Wow.
Yeah. So there's a lot of leeway. So we didn't know what we were doing. And so people were stacking cash. And then as time went on, like 2 years later, then they started really enforcing where you could actually cultivate. You couldn't cultivate in houses anymore. Like, we got raided with 12 pounds in Keystone, Colorado. And we had paperwork from a local dispensary who you know really well that I won't say on air. And they didn't do anything. And thank God I was there, because I probably would have done the whole lawyer up, like, can't get in my house, where my roommate was there, and he's a very chill guy. And he's like, yeah, come on in. And then, and I was at a wedding actually at the time. So that gave us, you know, operations experience. That gave us cultivation experience. That gave us money. And then when it legalized in Colorado, obviously, like, over the course of time, things became more stringent as far as, you know, what security systems you had to have place, zoning and stuff. So the bar did start going up, but it still wasn't, you know, millions of dollars. we're talking $50,000 now, right? And then licensing came out for legalization, and licensing started becoming expensive, but you had a lot in the medical side that you've done that could help you out.
Do you have any idea on those numbers on like rec licensure?
Oh, I forget how many. I used to know those numbers. I'm kind of removed from the dispensary scenes these days, but
yeah,
I don't remember. But it was rolled out. I mean, all in all said, Colorado did a great job rolling it out. You know, like now we realize the importance of social justice and social equity and some things that they didn't address at that point in time. But in regards to and the war on drugs, like people with, and they've removed this since, but you know, if you'd suffered from the war on drugs, you couldn't get a license. And so that was a really messed up part about it. Outside of that, they did a lot better job of rolling it out than California did. And they also put a 2-year moratorium on outside money coming into the state. So the only investors had to have like a permanent residence in Colorado.
That's super interesting.
Exactly. So big money from other places, you know, big corporate money really couldn't come into the state. And so that gave another leg up, which was really important. And so now as time's gone by, you've seen how hard it's been as regulation has tightened up, although I still think Colorado's more progressive, and a lot of people got shaken out, you know, and a lot more money's coming out. And it's really sad to see that. So, you know, for me, I'm really grateful because what kept me going in a lot of those hard times was just seeing those lights turn on people's heads. And now I've served over 3,000 people cannabis in very intimate settings. But, you know, there's times where I almost got driven out of this industry. And so that transition from the cannabis to psychedelics was natural because a lot of the entrepreneurs in cannabis, I mean, they're advocates at heart. Like they're doing this out of entrepreneurial advocacy.
If I wanted to make a ton of money, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, hey, let's make this next evolution. And we, you know, now we have the, you know, the stripes, the scars and stripes, if you will.
Yeah.
Of this. Shout out to John Racine for that one right there. If he's listening. But yeah, there's that's kind of you know, I think why there's just such a synergized movement between these two, let's say, just different classifications of psychedelics, essentially.
Right. Have you been following Oregon with the mushroom stuff much?
I have been following it to a degree, you know, and speaking with you a little bit before all of this, you know, getting a lot better understanding. And what I do as I'm looking at some of the decrim bills that are going on that I'm familiar with, you know, some of the stuff that they're trying to pass in California. I mean, and I know Oregon, I feel like is being the most progressive right now with everything. And it's nice because we're looking at the layers in such depth to get this right. And there is a sense of accountability that's happening, you know, whether it's good or bad, you know, like that's, I think in the eyes of the people themselves, you know, like there's a lot of, there's just a lot of different fabrics in the wave you can see of what's positive and negative, if you will. And so, but I'm glad that those conversations are going on. And I'm also happy that there's the deeper discussions because in the cannabis years, if you were cannabis, you were a good guy and it was like all teams go. And it could have been the head of your most hated pharmaceutical company and you're like, oh, you're about cannabis, woohoo, let's go, you know, and that was it. And now it's changed with California, where California is almost cannibalizing themselves in so many different ways because there's just fierceness going on. And so to find that happy medium, I think is more where the psychedelic space is right now.
So yeah, as I understand it, they've decriminalized a lot of drugs, not all drugs. And then there's certain kinds of possession limits and like there's no legal manufacturer. So you can't, with the current decrim law in Oregon, grow mushrooms decriminally wise. In January 1, the penalties might be lesser, but they're still like, you know, how do you get it to this point and causing some like weird stuff with
it's like the Amsterdam cannabis model.
Yeah, dude. So like January is coming quick. Like these people have to launch in January. Where do mushrooms come from on January 1? It's like the same cannabis problem, right?
Isn't
like,
it just cow patties out in the field?
Right. Gross. But yes. Yeah. Like more power to you if you like that kind of mushrooms, everybody, but like not for me. But I think I've had some grown on elephant dung, but it was like sterilized.
Yeah. We tried to hunt mushrooms when I was, you know, 15 years old.
So yeah, like how do we get all these people trained? How do we get them experienced, like watching other people facilitate So I think the first few cohorts of people getting trained, they're going to have to pay more money because they have to go overseas to see sessions happen, because there won't be sessions in Oregon until January that they can watch. That said, they could finish their training in early January with practicums there. But there's this whole chicken and egg thing. Like, where did those cannabis seeds come from? Or like, yeah. So it's going to be interesting.
So the FDA, not the FDA, the DEA just came out and said basically, and I didn't read everything that came out about this, but
one of my least favorite 3-letter organizations.
All right. Well, what about THC? Because THC seeds, they basically said aren't legal because they're not producing 0.3%, 3% or 3% of THC at that point in time. And so that's why, that's what makes hemp legal, right? Because it doesn't cross that threshold. So a seed doesn't cross that threshold. So they're saying technically it can be a plant that's going to produce high amounts of THC, but at the point of the seed, it's not illegal until it actually comes to the point of the flowering process when it produces that.
I love it.
Level over THC, because hemp and it's cannabis. There's hemp, and then there's, I hate to use the word marijuana. I don't own that word. I do think people can use that word, but for me, it's not. It's a weaponized word that I choose not to use. But essentially, that's what it is, right? It's hemp and it's ganja, right? And they're underneath the cannabis umbrella. Cannabis is not illegal. THC is illegal.
That's really interesting.
So can you get a spore? Can you get a spore?
Depends on.
Is a spore legal? Is a spore legal at that point? And that's what I'm getting at.
So it depends on state rules. So interstate wise, they can ship spores. There's a lot of like companies doing this quite openly for well over 10 years now. Probably more like 30. Like if you look in 1980s episodes or issues of High Times, you're going to see spores all over the back, right? So like, California, I believe it's currently illegal to possess spores, but it depends on the state. There's only a handful where it's illegal.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So there you go.
That's a great egg.
Right. Right.
If it's legal.
So yeah, how do you, and then there's this whole interesting conversation around genetics happening, which is really interesting to me.
Yeah.
Some people saying they've created or helped develop cultivars where you don't actually need oxygen to be introduced. You can do it in a whole closed system the whole time, which was actually a really critical part of the grow process. You have to like expose your thing to fresh air. So it has O2 and CO2 exchange.
Yeah.
So now these folks, one particular group I've chatted with says that they've solved, quote unquote, that problem, decreasing contamination for the home grower, which is really interesting. Yeah. I think anything that makes it easier for a home grow is good.
I agree with that. I mean, I was saying like, hey, do we really need to not have oxygen, nature and stuff like that? But in relation to helping home cultivations and empowering that, it's so important that we have control of our medicines.
Yeah. Right. Like anything that helps people grow at home, and like truffles, even like they don't have to go through that whole fruiting process.
Okay.
So you can actually skip like fruiting trays and like all that, because they kind of grow like potatoes under the inside the substrate. So it's like the sclerotia. So it's like this big chunk, and it's kind of like an energy reserve for the mycelium. It's like, okay, let's build this up because we have enough resources and we can fruit again and like colonize more if we have enough resources and new food.
It's an abundance.
Right. Exactly.
Byproduct.
Exactly. Yeah. And I unfortunately haven't eaten truffles yet. I will probably this year. But it's a really interesting development. And I think there's maybe 3 species that do that. Like Psilocybe tampanensis, mexicana, and maybe one more. And they're, available. Like, yeah. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, that is fascinating. And I think what we're here to continue to learn around mushrooms, right? And what we don't even know yet. I mean, I think, how exciting.
They just got conservation status at the like global scale. Fungi was just recently added within the last like 5 years as like a category that needs like conservation help and like protection.
Beautiful.
And Juliana Furci from the Fungi Foundation put that together. She's a really fabulous South American scientist and advocate.
Yep.
Yeah, check her out at some point. All right. I want to talk about Rolling Stone real quick.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
So you had kind of a big win. Was this mid last year that this went down?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you got appointed to their council, cultural council or something like that?
Yeah. So I was accepted onto the Rolling Stone Culture Council, essentially for what I do around cannabis hospitality that, we were speaking about with Cultivating Spirits.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And do they just hit you up once in a while? They
Well, it's, to me, it's like, it's just a really progressive kind of business association.
Yeah.
Is what I see it as. They allow us to connect with other people. So they're selective on who they bring on. And then, the value that has is like, you have the opportunity to connect with some really amazing people, but you also have a chance to really share your voice. And they do a really good job of being connected with you. They don't seem far away. They seem really, really close, which is really nice. And so it was a huge win for me to be able to share my voice, and I really, hope that I always come from a place that is for the betterment of the whole. And so I've been able to write, I've been featured in Rolling Stone back in the day, which was like such one of the early highlights of the career was just getting that phone call,
That's awesome.
And then being really featured in one of the articles, but then to write an article for Rolling Stone and the importance of, essentially conscious marketing from companies, and was really able to give out some phenomenal ideas in the cannabis space, because I feel like right now we're really limiting the potential of cannabis and limiting how it can actually affect someone's experience and how people are connecting with it. And this comes from people trying to create digestible marketing because they feel like that is the route in order to get new consumers on board. But actually, I think through that, they're actually doing a really big disservice, because people are just pigeonholing cannabis with like sleep or anxiety relief or energize, it's just really limiting everything in my opinion. And so therefore, if you're not open to what something and how something can benefit you, whether if you want to get in like a placebo thoughts or around that,
yeah.
But your mind has to have a thought before, you can actually move forward. Right. And even that thought might be subconscious, through the nervous systems. Right. And so having a limited understanding of what cannabis can actually do for your life isn't going to allow people to tap into the true potential of that particular medicine. And so this is really being driven right now by a lot of marketing and, people making purchasing decisions off of bud tenders, which are getting educated by the companies, right? So all of a sudden now we're looking at, why we think pharmaceuticals do disjustice so much, because it's like, maybe the doctors are getting their education from the pharmaceutical companies and they're driving, sales of a pharmaceutical product to these people. And then there's even bonuses and stuff. And so that's just where, I don't want to get into right or wrong, but like, that's where a line of distrust can actually happen. And cannabis is a lot smaller of a sales.
For improvement.
Huge opportunity for improvement. And so that's what the first article was on. And I articulated it so much better than I just did to you right now in that article, but it got a lot of eyes on it and a lot of appreciation. And so this is the voice that I'm looking forward to getting out because I strive to speak what I feel is the truth, not afraid to stand up against somebody, but also understanding that whoever I'm quote unquote standing up against, there's compassion there, right? Because there, as we look at big multi-state operators who we think are doing this industry a disservice, we got to understand that there's capitalism involved, and we got to understand that and I just don't want to put on MSOs. This is everyone that's involved with your life, but obviously people are conditioned in a certain way, and we see, we can understand the experiences that these people may have had to lead them to be who they are. And so for us to hate that person is really a disservice of making this place a better place. You're never going to be able to do that. And so seeing compassion in that person, is very important. And I think disagreement and being able to speak about disagreement is really an amazing thing, to be able to do that. And so I always want to come from a place of truth, because I'm not afraid to engage in some of the ways that we're speaking about right now. And this plant, and this cannabis plant, is so important to me because it has limitless potential based on each individual's body, mind, and soul makeup. And once we realize that there's a limitless potential around that, then the thoughts, the feelings you can get into the body are going to drive you into certain ideas, certain experiences, certain understandings that can do a benefit, but you also get a real more of an introspective lens into reality. And when we look at that introspective lens of reality, then we understand the importance more so, I think, of all life on earth, but also like all of the bells and whistles that are coming into our faces every single day to try to get us to live a certain way where you're like, whoa, maybe that doesn't matter so much, you know? And so to be able to do this is so important. And, you know, the next Rolling Stone article that will be coming out is the importance of consumer empowerment within cannabis. And I hate to use the word empowerment because that's taking someone's power away. But at the same time, we've been so misguided that we do need to take that power back, if you will, and put it in our own hands.
We've spent over $1 trillion, United States, on the drug war so far.
Jesus Christ.
So we're digging ourselves out of a big hole. So that's why misinformation, like shitty education's out there, and we've got to really address this, right? Like maybe some of those episodes were right, that it's just like sleep, awake, and like creative, like 3 only categories for now until we can have enough groundwork to like say, oh, there's so many different things that we can lean into here.
Yeah.
So you're not only, are you trying to target mostly, so let's talk about this new company, CashoM.
Okay.
Like, are you trying to go into kind of like a consumer ed thing or bud tender ed or both?
Yeah. It's consumer education, full on consumer education. Yeah. So we're going to be a platform that offers masterclass education for beginners and connoisseurs of cannabis. So it will be a platform of, you know, over 300 video lessons that are, you know, anywhere from 2 to 12 minutes. And you'll be able to watch the video or listen to it in Audible based on what your learning style preference is. And then we'll even go as far as activity books and community engagement if you choose, or you can just listen to it while you work out, you know? And this comes from being outlined from my experience in the cannabis space and doing all the things that I've done with serving so many people. So while I'm not a subject matter in every aspect of it, I did really design and outline this first volume while creating a good chunk of the content for it. And it's really focusing on more of the lifestyle usage of cannabis, but still framing cannabis as a medicine, but reframing medicine as things that we intake into our body every day and can be preventative, opposed to only looking as medicine from a sick care system. And so that's really how we frame it. And so how can you use it in these lifestyle ways while understanding medical properties and science properties and so forth and so on, but really coming from it, like, how can it empower you in your day to day, but also understanding like cannabis isn't meant for you to use every day, you know, like, and there's portions of life where it absolutely is. And it's a great alternative to a lot of things. And I shouldn't say day to day, cannabis is not for everybody. Not everyone should smoke cannabis. Everyone should be aware of how it may help them. And maybe there's periods in their life where they need to come to it because they understand it, the plant. But, you know, I use cannabis frequently, and I probably will use cannabis, you know, for the rest of my life somewhat frequently, but the amounts in which I consume are very minimal. And if we have an appropriate, you know, as a society, an appropriate relationship with this plant, I believe we'll have people who consume cannabis frequently consume less cannabis, and people who don't consume cannabis at all consume cannabis more. You know, and I think that's how this is ultimately going to shift out if we are coming from a place of what I think cannabis wants and the essence of cannabis, like how cannabis wants to serve the world. You know, if you think in that sort of
this
lens.
Is one of the unique things you've done is kind of like shifted from like, let's only talk about super duper clinical things to let's take like a kind of plant spirit approach, in a lot of ways, more emotional approach, which I think is a super great differentiator from everything else I've seen out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've really, you know, have combed this over by serving so many people cannabis. Right. And so this is where CashoM is coming at from the lifestyle standpoint to really empower it. And so I believe we have something in it for everybody, you know, whether you want to understand plant anatomy or you want to understand why cannabis gives you a feminine feeling, right? What are the connoisseurs aspects of cannabis? What is terroir? What are these? But also, trichome 101, right? What is the science behind terpenes, the science behind flavonoids, the science behind cannabinoids, right? How do you load a pipe? For someone who's never consumed, right? But also, how do you use your organoleptic, how do you use the organoleptic properties of cannabis to identify if it's quality or not, and that's how it's in relationship to your senses, so it's really dynamic. And we have some unbelievable subject matter experts who are involved with the project beyond myself. And this is the goal, is to give people all around the world access to this type of knowledge. And we act as a guide. We're not trying to say this is the only way to do it. We're trying to give you a big umbrella of perspectives and allow you to pick what works for you, because thank God we're all different humans.
Like my programs. It's awesome.
I know. And
it's like philosophically similar, right? Like, cause there's so many friggin' approaches out there. How do you pick one? It's like, you got to expose people to a ton before they find what really speaks to them. Right.
So I love that. Yeah, that's exactly how you do it. And I can't wait to take some of the psychedelics today, of course. I'm not a clinician where those are more focused on, but it still, I know, has importance for everybody that they can take from it. But Amanda Ryman, who people in the cannabis space will absolutely know that name. She's done a lot of work.
A Twitter space with her on Bicycle Day, maybe.
Yeah, you actually did a podcast with her.
She's coming soon.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I just joined her little plant gang, or I'm trying to. We'll see what happens there.
Yeah. I actually spoke to her, and she heard I was in Breckenridge.
Super cool.
And so she said, what we don't have is the philosophy of cannabis, and that's what you're building. And I loved how you said that, and that's what we're trying to do, is to be that guide. So we touch on this, on the science of why you feel the way that you feel whenever you consume cannabis. We have a science-based one. We also have a theoretical-based one, right? And those are kind of our two biggest sections, modules, if you will, of the curriculum, and what you don't have to take the whole thing. You just pick little bits and pieces of whatever calls to you. But we have Eastern medicine and Western medicine that we speak of, Eastern science and Western science, we have Ayurvedic perspectives into it as well as Western science, and I think that's really important because, again, thank God we're all different, like what a mundane world it would be if we were all the same, like if I was sitting across from you, look just like you, and right now, like that would suck, and so we need to understand that there's never going to be one right way. It's just not going to happen. And the more that we grip onto that, the worse it's going to be for all of these movements that we're so passionate about. And so again, even honing back to the compassion for other, companies and stuff like that. Like this is like, at the end of the day, like they always say, love wins out, and I feel like the day my life changed, the day I was able to love Donald Trump, because that is someone who I don't agree with in so many different ways. But when being at the Women's March, I'm watching, love, one earth, all of this oneness, and then on the same side, it's like, fuck Donald Trump, and I was like, that's just such a dichotomy. Like, how can we love everything and preach love, but then hate this guy with so much? And that was an opportunity for me to really be able to find compassion for him and have to understand, like, to find love for him, although I don't agree with him, whatsoever. And I don't have to agree with him. I don't have to support him, but at the end of the day, we have to find a commonality in which all of our, spiritual basis can be laid upon if we ever want to get along in this world. And that has to be a commonality of love. And if we don't have that, then this modern society we're in is just not going to work at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is, you've done a lot of inner work, and people, hearing you speak, you're like, oh, this cannabis guy, ... But it's like, there's a lot more going on, and you've done a lot of really interesting self-inquiry too. Like that one retreat you did all by yourself.
Yeah.
Holy guacamole. And then there's so much other stuff too. Like you take this very seriously, and you try your best, as far as I can tell, to be as authentic to others and yourself as you can be. And it seems like plant medicine, ayahuasca and mushrooms have been like a really big help for you. But and it seems to have inspired CashoM quite a bit too.
Yeah. Well, I would say first and foremost, I mean, it's been, kind of my yoga journey first, right? Which inquired, and I'll get into the plant medicine journeys, but I want to start off with the yoga aspect of it. And I think there is the plant medicine world, it takes the work outside of it, or again, it's not going to work. And so my journey through yoga really has equipped me with many of tools to then take big experiences that I may have with plant medicine ceremonies and be able to integrate that, right? And so it's not only yoga, there's many of tools out there, right? Like Joe's an expert in breath work, is a powerful tool. In yoga, it's more than just asana, which is the body movement, but it is breath, it is meditation. So breath, pranayama, it is meditation. It is the yamas and niyamas, which are kind of bases to live by, and these are all part of the 8 limbs that lead up to Ananda and bliss and, and that type of state, which, gosh, man, there's 1 or 2 people maybe living in the world right now that will reach that state. And so I had the biggest download of my life. This is almost a year. It was 10 years ago, a week ago, essentially. Wow. And that came when I was on a beach in Thailand, pretty much all by myself for a couple of days in southern Thailand where no tourists were at. And it happened to be Easter Sunday and my little sister's 18th birthday. And this download changed everything. And it was like the biggest entheogenic experience that I had ever had, while not even really understanding the word entheogen at that time, right? And this came, I was completely sober. And so there's opportunities to receive this deeper inner work outside of the plant medicine community. But within this, the plant medicine community is very important. And community, when I'm saying that, I'm speaking to the medicines themselves of Aya and, we'll put fungi and cacti within that as well. Right. And so that has, that is so important to giving you a lens into your own way of being in relationship to the world that can greatly shape how you want to show up in the world. And around that, there's discipline outside of that has to come, but it can give you just inquiries in such deep ways, while also potentially making, anyone who knows the medicine it can be very tricky at the same time, and they're going to tell you that. And so that is why I think, doing more inner work outside of plant medicine ceremonies or even plant medicine therapeutics is so important, so you can help discern your certain things and show up in certain ways that's going to be very beneficial. And it takes a lot, like we're humans of conditioning. So everything that's been around you in your life has conditioned you to who you are today. Yeah. And within that, patterns surface, and to fall back into those patterns can be very easy. And so while we may participate in an Aya ceremony and we're feeling that for months after, eventually the force, that you're in is going to wear off. And if we're having to do Aya ceremonies 5 times a year, then the medicine's not working. I went 3.5 years through really big experiences because it took that much to really discern, while using, mushrooms and having other ceremonies in between that. But that's kind of what it is. And so in those off times, it's really important to use these tools or self-inquiries and reflecting, whatever that tool is for you, and to grow who you want to be in this lifetime at this time of, which I think a lot of people believe, and not all may, but it's a very transformational time in history, and there is ripeness for change, like in the soils especially coming out of COVID, and that really brought a lot of deep understanding to people's lives, but also spun a lot of people out of control and a lot of things in between all of that. And obviously in the sadness of a lot of people who lost their lives, obviously. So yeah, I appreciate you speaking to that, Joe, because it's not just cannabis, like cannabis is just an aspect that I am trying to master within being a part of the whole of trying to be a part of something that could potentially make the world a better place, which I don't even think, what is a better world even look like at the end of the day, right? And who is the person to judge that? But to understand that there's a wisdom in the ethers that's working around us that will help shaping us. If we just show up and be our best selves, then that can have so much change. And that's what we're trying to do. And and self-inquiry is a big part of it, and part of that, I went and locked myself up. He said, in Wisconsin for 2 months, and like it ended up being super intense, and I think we have our own ways of getting there. And I guess this is some of the torture I like to put myself through.
Well, it's like with the deep yoga practice, it's kind of like it tracks really well. And like solo practice is super important to many spiritual traditions. And risky. And I'm not advising anybody to do it. I'm impressed as hell. Like, that's a big deal.
Yeah. Well, if I was wanting to go to Tulum at the end of 2020 when things got shut down in Breckenridge, I couldn't run any events. And so I was like, okay, let's go to Tulum. That's what all the cool kids are doing. And so I should go do that. Right. And then my heart was like, no, you actually need to go dive deep into winter. And so I was like, oh, really? And like, yeah, like you need to go reflect the season of internal work. And you need to go deep in winter. So I went into northern Wisconsin and got a house in the woods on this like frozen river and was there for 2 months. And 3 weeks into it, I did a solo psilocybin journey, about 4 grams, and it was super intense. And within that really intense experience, things came up for me and surfaced for me that I had no idea were there. I was like, I thought I did all the work, like I thought I was fucking good. I was like, where did this come from? Like some really deep down stored trauma experience, samskara, I would like to refer it to, which is the yoga term is samskara. And reflecting on that time now, basically out of that experience, I just sat and looked at a fire every night for 6 weeks. But now as I reflect on all of that, I needed to create space in my life for what was coming in. And with such deep work going into CashoM, like there's 40 people involved with this project now, like it means so much. Yeah. And so I really needed to step up, if you will. So I came out of this in March of 2021. So just about, over a year ago. And, I'm reading Melodoma Somé right now, and it's this book called Ritual. And he was born in a West African tribe, and then he got Western education, right? And his name actually means to befriend the enemy. And so what they do there is they bring a shaman to work with the pregnant woman, and they go inside and speak to the kid. And we're not talking about medicine ceremony. We're talking about, lower world, upper world type of drum and rattle shamanism. And they ask the human of like what their purpose is on earth. And then they name the person after that. And so this guy was to befriend the enemy. And so he goes in and gets westernized, educated, and he's brilliant of really being a bridge over these West African, or his tribe specifically, because that's what he speaks of, but you would imagine a commonality while being different in their own, tribes. And he speaks to, and he does a really good job of giving you these really heady explanations in very layman westernized terms and connecting with us. And that's what I really love about his writing. But he speaks about like literally that experience takes up your cellular space. And so, and we all think that experiences, so whatever that is, right? And those can take up more space. So that's trauma, but that's also blissful experiences, right? And so, and we all know somatic healing. And I'm sure most people around here know that, this body stores things, right? But seeing how he puts it into it's taking up space. And then when something new tries to come into that space, that's actually when pain happens, because the new, we'll just call it experience for lack of a better word, is not able to take hold and take up any space in your body because there's something already there. And all of a sudden, that's when your mental pain comes into play, is that, right? You following me?
Yeah.
And so I felt like there was stuff that was so deep in me that needed to surface and come out. That's what I got when my mind was, my heart essentially was like, you need to go to Wisconsin and drive deep internal. And then I do 4 grams of psilocybin and my own personal ceremony. And all of a sudden, like what came up, and I'm like, it came out of the middle of nowhere. And then I had to do work for 6 or 7 weeks, and it was almost traumatic. It wasn't like, even coming out of it, it was like, whoa, that was fucking harsh, man. And, and then now seeing the importance of like, that might have been one of the most important, 2 months of my adult life, and that's, so people who say, hey, we want to take the bad trip out of a trip is dangerous territory. Cause I know that's trying to be developed.
There's people trying to take the experience out. Like there's certainly some clinical applications where it makes sense and some people with certain conditions where it makes sense. But like largely,
absolutely,
I love the whole thing. Like how kind of not boring. Like if a drug was only, or a substance is only like super pleasant, like that fear, maybe that resistance around like how big and scary some things can be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I was just told this great saying just the other day. Leonard Picard, I was just with him for a couple days. He just did 20 years in maximum security for acid manufacture. Supposed to serve 2 life sentences, I think. So
a blessing and a horrible
lovely
story
man.
All of that.
Lovely man. But back in the day, they used to call it catching an edge on blotter acid, like just like a skiing term, like catching your edge. Because like often when you're laying blotter with LSD, it actually will like concentrate in certain zones, like at the edge, like it's like perforated. So you're like caught an edge and it was like too much. You expected normal concentration, but that is not what you got. So catching an edge. So yeah, digression, but there's something there like that excitement. And it's like, there's been a lot of discussion in the field lately of like, just because your experience wasn't super blissful, a lot of people try to label it harmful. And I'm like, no, fuck that. Yeah. Like we need nuance. And like, sometimes we need to go through some bad shit to heal.
Well, I think I got in a conversation with you a couple months ago, just on one of our just check-in calls or something about like, because people had suicidal thoughts, then all of a sudden it was looked as a bad thing.
This was the Compass Pathways trial results.
Okay. That's what
like, it's like, I think having even just a little bit of suicidal ideation is kind of like super duper natural and normal.
Yeah.
Especially in this culture.
Yeah. I mean, I've had suicidal thoughts, right? Like I almost committed suicide when I was 23 years old. I mean, I was on, I almost caught an edge that would never brought me back. And so for what I'm hearing when you're talking, what you're just saying, to me, that just sounds like the pharmaceutical and American culture of not wanting to face the fears, right? Like we're going to make these pills that make you happy and you run away from your thoughts. And that's what I think just continues to fester, I should say, trauma, is that masking of it. And the trauma will fester inside of you and something greater will manifest out of that. That's not, let's just say, beneficial to yourself. And so that's a dangerous road to walk about for someone to determine that for everyone else, right? And I think there is a wisdom to the medicine. Like, if you feel like you ate too many mushrooms, maybe you're supposed to eat too many mushrooms. I'm not encouraging that, but I'm just saying like you get provided a lot of things in your life that can lead to a lot of other things. And we don't always have the capability of seeing the importance of that. Like I just spoke of, I was traumatized during my time in Wisconsin, but looking back on it, it's really a crucial moment of my life. And so one of the many, it wasn't, the most impactful experience, obviously. But so whenever we want to create a standardized dosing for a therapeutic setting, because I'm a male who weighs 160 pounds and I'm 36 years old, and that's what everyone's taking, all of a sudden, in my personal opinion, is that we're taking the wisdom of my intuition suggesting where I want to go for this experience and then letting the person serving it or serving myself that weight in mushrooms. Let's just use that since we're talking about therapeutic settings right now, right? So, we need to really be conversational about this, and we probably won't ever have like the right answer, and we won't have the right answer because, as we were speaking about with CashoM a few minutes ago, like there's so many right answers based on the people. And so we need to continue to keep options out there for, let's just say, our viewpoints.
Right. We need optionality. Like
optionality.
We're so philosophically immature as a culture and as individuals regularly that we think, this is the right thing. Good Lord. And then we think this is like the right thing to do. And then we universalize. It's like, of course, everybody needs to eat 17 pounds of broccoli every day or some shit.
Yeah.
Like, right. Like we can't be that prescriptive because there's so much diversity, be it genetic, spiritual, cultural.
Yeah.
Like in Hopkins, for instance, and this might've been improved. I don't know if we talked about this. Like they'll sometimes use composers who are famously anti-Semitic, and then like a Jewish person will come through and recognize like a Wagner or somebody else from like late 1800s Germany who was like notoriously anti-Semite. And what does that do in a session?
Whoa.
Right? Heavy, right? So like but Europe is just wildly anti-Semitic anyway, or historically, sorry, everybody in Europe.
Yeah.
There's a lot there, and there's still currents of it, but it's like, that is just what the European scene was.
Yeah.
And it's horrible. But like, we have to like face that actuality of our racist past, even in Europe, and be careful when we make these universal prescriptions. Yeah,
totally. Because the byproducts of them can be just so much more that we don't see based on what you're just saying, mind, body, soul, ethnicity, backgrounds and stuff like that. I mean, we're talking about creating an integrity form, right? Or, just a proclamation.
Expand on that. Like, North Star Pledge, like, I thought it was an okay starting point. Like, I wasn't really all that sold on it. Yeah. But I know a lot of people bought. But like, is this kind of like a slightly different thing than that?
Well, so first of all, we're not anywhere as far as a lot of the people who worked on North Star, right? Mm-hmm. Or that type of kind of industrial credibility. So, I want to make that really, really clear. But we are having, just a lot of conversation within medicine communities around the importance of psilocybin ceremonies. And so within this, psilocybin is the most sustainable plant medicine that there is, to my knowledge. And
until we figure out how to use the grasses.
There we go. Perfect. I love it. So, as, these conversations are happening, it's like, all right, where do we start at? We need to start at a place of integrity. And, to create a document that states that place of integrity, we think is really, really important. And then from that place of integrity, then maybe there's potential to build on what we see as a template and what a lot of the people organizing could potentially look at if it calls to them and maybe operate in similar type of settings and containers that comes from all of this. And so these are just, kind of ideas at this point in time to see if there is something there or not. Right. And so, and hopefully a lot of people can just view this and have input on it, right? As, maybe who aren't all industry focused per se, right? Mm-hmm. Like more of just the grassroots organizers within communities, right? And I have no idea where this is going to go. So I just really want to be clear about that. Mm-hmm. But within one of the conversations, something that I got turned on to is that, well, in order for something like this to work, everyone needs to have a similar set. So set and setting, mindset, right? And everyone's set is so different based on the samskaras, the experience, the conditioning as people are raised. And then that's going to change, from a lot of different cultures and stuff like that. And so to come back to that universal commonalities in order to make something universal, I'm like, well, fuck, dude. Like, I don't know if that's possible, right? Maybe if we finally come from that place of love, on that universal thread that everything can be based upon. But I think we are so far removed from that as a fundamental within our cultures, right? Although you do see it preached a lot, but it being a fundamental of how we're raised, within the institutions that we're a part of, it's just not as prominent as I would hope it would be, as now I try to think I know what a sane society would actually look like. And so, right. And so there's obviously a lot of complexity to what we're speaking about right now, but to come from a place of integrity is the most important thing, and so is this going to be the only place of integrity? Absolutely not. But is there opportunities to start creating where people can look at and say, hey, this one works for me, this one doesn't work for me, but I hope that there is a common thread between all of those, from the North Star and other ones that may be potentially, out there for people to look at, is that, we're coming from a place of love from that side of things, right? From the people who are leading that. And then that place of love that they're coming from can trickle down through those forms of integrity, that may be able to trickle down into templates and education for people who are, coming together around the world right now, leading their own ceremonies and providing containers for people to have their experience. And obviously there's a lot that, within the wisdom traditions all around the world who have been doing this forever. But as everything's spreading into all of these individualized, just groups coming together, then it's really important that we can learn from the importance of a lot of these, include a lot of the wisdom. Any indigenous people who want to be a part of these conversations absolutely need to be included as all of this unfolds. But there also just seems like that because we're connecting with so many different unique, again, sets of people, mindsets, right? That we have to broaden how people can connect, but while still holding the basis of love, still holding values that really built these wisdom traditions for such a long time, which, a lot of it is just our connection to the earth, which as man is modernized, we've just been disconnected from the earth. And so these are all very complex, tricky things that you need to listen to more than you need to act to, but it's amazing that there's conversations happening in which we can listen to and really just gain perspective.
Yeah, it's important. Like there's so much nuance there too. So people should listen to that a couple times over, I think. Because, what Silicon, just heard it referred to as Silicon Gulch the other day, and I giggled so much. So the Silicon Gulch crowd is going to have a really different set of values from hippies living in Costa Rica or people that develop their own little, community somewhere. And is there some common ground? For sure. But it's how do we expand that and bring people together and create opportunity for cross-pollination? And what I'm seeing is the last couple of years, the COVID has made division in the psychedelic scene really bad, partly because nobody's been able to look each other in the eye and have higher bandwidth communication, than a couple real smart aleck tweets that try to crush somebody's spirit.
Yeah.
It's what are you guys doing?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's not the appropriate way to engage, if we're here to move this movement forward. And, I know we're coming to an end of this chat here, and gosh, I feel like we go by for hours. So
we got to do another one sooner.
Yeah, exactly.
It's been too long.
Yeah, it's been too long, but it was really beautiful. I got to participate on the spring equinox recently. I went out to Carbondale and just had this beautiful experience at a amazing yoga property out there called True Nature Healing Arts in Carbondale. And it's phenomenal. And as I was leaving, after just a bunch of just my own connecting throughout the day, I got invited to a little drum ceremony by an indigenous man, who I just kind of ran into. And I was like, he's like, yeah, we're going to do it at the Sacred Fire. And I was like, yeah, sure. Let's go. And it was just really intimate. He played a few songs and then he started sharing some wisdom and some prayer. And within that, I wish I knew more about this man so I could actually tell you his lineage and everything and give that, I can tell you that, it happened on Ute land that was stolen. Obviously all the land's stolen, but that's the
just
land
where we are right now too.
Yeah, exactly. And Southern Ute tribe. And so as he came into sharing some prayers and thoughts of wisdom after doing some song, he spoke about the importance of standing in a circle. Because when you're in a circle, you can look at everyone and see everyone in the eye. And if you're having a common, place where you're all trying to go, being able to do that is very important. But when you step into the middle of that circle, there might be greater fruits there, but all of a sudden you know who you've trampled over to get there. And at the same time, you have to look over your shoulder to see everybody. And so what I'm hearing with that story is people not being able to look each other in the eye and the importance of that. But I think within that, there's people stepping into the center of the circle. And so let's, think about that as time goes on with what we're trying to do. You can have tough conversations in a circle, but as soon as you're trying to step in the center of that circle, then you all of a sudden have to look over your back. And that was really important for me to hear at that time. And I think it's hopefully it's a good reality check for a lot of people to understand to how we're going to come together to get this right. And it's not my way. It's not Joe's way. It's not your way. It's not this person's way. It's not this company's way. It's not, it's not Maps. It's not Charcoon. I mean, it's none of it. It's all of that together is the only way that this is going to happen, and standing in a circle. And I may make mistakes one day, and within that, standing in a circle can allow me to reflect. It can allow me to understand and allow me to be able to become better. And it's important for us to be able to hold that space for maybe some of these other people as well who choose to stand in that circle.
Yeah. I love that. There's so much complexity. There's so little certainty, and people like really want to hold on to something that feels really certain. And there's so little. I was listening to Robert Anton Wilson talk the other day. Are you familiar with Robert Anton Wilson? Incredible person. I'll try to turn you on to him. But his whole thing was it's all around uncertainty and chaos. It's like as information accelerates, like he made his whole, we got to wrap, but at the time of Jesus, there was one Jesus of information. 1500, there was two Jesus of information. He had to make a unit because there's no unit. and that just kept accelerating, where like we're probably seeing information doubling every couple months now on the planet. And with that comes massive amounts of complexity and uncertainty. And people really dislike uncertainty, which is why they buy really simple answers on television and elsewhere. It's like, how much does the Ukraine-Russia thing actually impact gas prices? Or is it greedy oil execs who found a great opportunity? Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Right. So and similarly with all sorts of other resources. And, the complexity is something we should just assume we don't know a lot. We can try to keep knowing more. But like that certainty, our sensory apparatus isn't really going to give us that. Like even in mathematics, which we think is certain, has so much broken in it. And like there's, maybe we'll get there, but maybe we won't. And we just have to sit with uncertainty. Terrence McKenna was always like, the point of psychedelics is to sit with increasing levels of uncertainty in our day-to-day lives, which is terrifying, but it kind of inspiring.
Yeah. That's what shapes us, I mean, when we're going through a bad experience, we grow from it, like if we want to keep developing, if we're happy all the time, if we have the happy pill, if we have the happy mushrooms all the time, then there's no point to grow and advance, but if we can push the edge, as we spoke about, then, there's that opportunity for growth, and then, but how do we view that, right? Like what's the yin and the yang, right? Like it's so complex. And what I'm really happy that the conversations are becoming more out in the open than they've ever been in, let's say, modern American society.
Totally.
And it's beautiful, because this is the reason in which we spoke about how everything is so ripe for change right now. And the more that we can realize we don't fucking know, then the better off everything's going to be. It's the child's mind. It's the Soshin from a Zen Buddhist term. And it's to live like a child and be curious about everything, and don't think about what the result of the action may be per se, obviously do that to an extent, and then just be in awe of everything around you, and then let's see how we can grow and advance from there. And so with that, shameless plug, I hope everyone can be curious about CashoM. Content dropping this summer.
And Cultivating Spirits. I'm seeing like an option for like adults to go to a children's museum with Cultivating Spirits. So websites, how do you get to CashoM?
So CashoM.org, CASHOM is CashoM. CultivatingSpirits.com. You can look myself up on Instagram, Philip with 1L_wolf, just like the animal. And you can find me, and links to all of this stuff is there. But yeah, go enter your email address at CashoM.org, get a free masterclass and stuff like that. So we'll start having, again, content ready this summertime. And some really cool things to speak about. And we didn't actually even get to speak about the United Nations event, which I was invited to on May 5th. Lord. That I'm going to around cannabis affecting economy and also agriculture.
We'll do an Instagram live on that soon. I hope, because that's so awesome.
Yeah, I'm feeling really grateful for that. So, Joe, yeah, thank you for letting me in your living room today. It's been so fun just to see this parallel in careers and our passions just to happen over time. And thank you for giving people access to this, people's perspectives through your podcast. It's just, really been beautiful. And there's so many people who I see on their Instagram stories, like posting the new psychedelics today, drop. And I'm just like, yes, fucking get it.
That's so sick. Yeah. Well, thanks for being here, Philip. Can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. Much love. And thank you all for listening.
And there you have it, everybody. Philip Wolf, Cultivating Spirits, CashoM. Beautiful companies, really excited to learn more. I still haven't even been to a Cultivating Spirits event, which is kind of silly since I've known Philip for so long. Maybe we can do one together at some point, Philip, once you free up your time a bit. CashoM definitely taking up a ton of time, but curious to check that stuff out too. I don't know, like just the fact that there's more different kinds of education coming online, I think is really important. The old models have served us pretty well. They got us to here, but we need to figure out what kind of education we need to get us to where we need to be to have, what we want on the planet, which is still up for debate. It's a lot of discussion around that. I think there's so much we need to really investigate here. Like, what kind of lives do we want? What kind of climate, ecosystem health do we want here? And how can we get there? How can we treat the planet really well, treat ourselves really well, because we're part of the planet, part of nature. Yeah, what do we do? And how do we get there? So, we could go even further back. Who am I? What am I doing here? What am I supposed to be doing here? What have I done so far? How does that relate to where I should go in the future? Anyway, things we think about. All right. I hope y'all enjoyed that episode, Philip Wolf. Sorry for my philosophical rant, if that counts as philosophy. And yeah, we'll see you on the next episode. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next time. It's Joe Moore signing off.